My question really is that I asked you when we last met in one of these meetings, indeed, and since then have followed up with the Mayor, about the review you were carrying out with regard to the Cenotaph incident, when there was a protest by Extinction Rebellion, and you said you were looking into it, you would be looking into it. Can you tell me what the results been?
Commissioner, question is to you, I believe.
My apologies. It'll be the last time I do that. Sorry, Chair. Yes, I think we met on the afternoon of the 11th of November, and this incident had happened that morning. And so I was still in the process of reviewing it. The first thing I would say is that the banner and the banner that was placed there and the incident itself, I, in common with many, many other people across the country, regard as not only inappropriate, as I said on the day, but a deeply offensive thing to do on that important day, 100 years on, such an important day. In terms of what happened, I can tell you that we had no intelligence whatsoever that this was going to happen. From the CCTV, which I've looked at myself, we can see that a very small number of people arrived at the base of the Cenotaph and unfurled the banner and placed the wreath without causing any damage to anything else at just 1 minute past 8. At that point, they were not in the line of sight of any officers in the street. Officers who were policing the operation to support the ceremony at the Cenotaph later that morning were not due to arrive until between 8:30 and 9. They were, in fact, out on horse guards at that point, having a briefing. Officers were alerted, and they made their way immediately. They arrived at 8 minutes past 8. I know that the media have said it took 30 minutes for the officers to arrive. It didn't. They were there by 8 minutes past 8, and they removed the articles at 12 minutes past 8. Of course, by the time they arrived, the people had left. On the day, the officers who responded formed the view that this did not amount to any crime, and that was a perfectly respectable view for them to take. We've looked at that again. It's clear there is no breach by these people of the COVID regulations, nor, as was suggested by some, would it meet public decency. I can tell you, sir, that we are still in seeking a further piece of advice from the Crown Prosecution Service about Section 5 of the Public Order Act, but I'd have to say the bar there is pretty high. So overall, in my view, no failure by any individual officer in that. What we're now doing, I imagine you'll be interested in, is we have increased patrols in the area. We are seeking to improve the camera coverage that there is around the Cenotaph even further. Of course, we'll look at future important days in the calendar or similar operations with a careful eye to see what is an appropriate sort of set of time for the officers to be ground assigned, as we call it, deployed. And most crucially, given that, of course, this is an open monument, which is not a place I think people would expect to have boarded up, for example, or to have enormous numbers of officers around it. We are working with our partners who own the Cenotaph, and of course those who make use of it, the British Legion and others, in order to see how we can reduce the risk further of inappropriate or offensive things happening in the future.
Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. When we spoke last, you said that they were there for about 20 minutes, so that's been revised. That wasn't the present.
The media said 30.
You said
I've looked at the CCTV myself. I can tell you they were there, the people were there for just a very short period of time.
20 minutes? And
my people arrived 7 minutes after they first got there.
So, but they were there for about 20 minutes?
No, I don't think they were. No, they weren't there for about 20 minutes.
Well, look, the fact is that, as you say, it was extremely offensive to many people, but my main regard as well is that it was an extraordinary security risk. And when you say that there was sort of no way that there was no intelligence? How did they actually get, you know, I'm around that way a lot, how do they actually get so near to the Cenotaph to be able to move their stuff out and then stay there unchallenged? The reason I want to ask you this again, Commissioner, because this is extremely important to, I think, millions of people actually. The Cenotaph is not just a London monument, it's a British monument. Just a couple of weeks later, and indeed a couple of 100 yards away from the Cenotaph, you know, a peaceful protester, a 72-year-old woman, managed to be bundled into the back of a police van by 4 of your officers. There seemed to be no problem about dealing with her very quickly, to the point, such an outrageous act that an MP brought it up in the House that very day. A 72-year-old woman was bundled into the back of a police van. She was protesting outside Parliament, perfectly peacefully. 4 policemen got to her and put her in the back of a van. It caused outrage from a passing MP who then brought it up in the House of Commons quite rightly. This is extraordinary. This is in the same vicinity. You managed somehow to jump on those people very, very quickly. Indeed, in this case, a 72-year-old woman. And yet somehow or other, Extinction Rebellion somehow manages to be able to stay there for a matter of minutes up the road. Can you not see how people now think that you do preside over two-tier policing?
Well, I don't preside over two-tier policing. We are completely impartial. We deal with the circumstances that we have in front of us, and we deal with our understanding of what the intelligence is and what the likely risk of any type of occurrence might be. These events, of course, as you say, although in a geographically similar place, that you're talking about, we're on different days. Now, I need to be careful about the second one because, of course, people have been charged. And that was an unlawful protest in which we had gone to police that event in order to persuade people not to protest, which at the time was unlawful, and to disperse. They did not do so. I need to be careful how much further I go. But that is what we were doing our policing job. Now, in terms of the Cenotaph, I think I've explained. There were no one of the suggestions at the time was that police officers were standing and watching. My point is there were no police officers in the area at the time, in the immediate area at the time. They were not in the line of sight of any officers. We police. I go there as much as you do, possibly more. We police that area with a lot of presence. But they are patrolling officers in the main who are moving around. There are a whole range of sites that are of interest to people, and also some places which contain, of course, people who are absolutely, you know, like Parliament, need a huge amount of personal protection. But we police primarily on the streets with patrols. And I can't say anything other than, at that point, there was not a patrol looking at it. What I can say is as soon as we were alerted, we were there very quickly. By that time, the people had gone. You asked me how they got there. I think they came out of the tube station. I haven't followed that bit of CCTV. That's what I'm told. They came out of this tube station. They came down a tiny bit of Whitehall. They stood there looking completely like any other citizen, and then walked across the Cenotaph. Many people were walking up to the Cenotaph at the time, lots of visitors to the Cenotaph. And when they got there, they unfurled their banner. That's how it happened.
I know, Commissioner. And you've been through that before. You say you can't talk because people are being charged or whatever on this second incident I'm talking about. But maybe let me give you a bit of context. Extinction Rebellion early this year, even during this COVID period, we're allowed to bring London pretty much to a halt, central London. This happened again, and yet, as I said, a 72-year-old woman just protesting on her own is manhandled and basically spread-eagled and put into a police van like that. So, frankly, this does not look like partial policing. It seems that there are certain protests and certain causes which somehow you put a favourable eye on, whether it is Extinction Rebellion or Black Lives Matter, and yet when it comes to other forms of protest, you are extremely, shall we say, keen to keep the peace.
Very briefly,
I think I've said to you before, my officers, I believe, are as experienced as anyone in the world, as professional as anyone in the world, probably more so. And they are, one thing they absolutely definitely are, is completely impartial. They deal with the circumstances in front of them. We have arrested hundreds of Extinction Rebellion protesters over the last 18 months, hundreds and hundreds, and they've been charged and they've gone to court. We have to deal with what is in front of us and what is possible, what is appropriate in all the circumstances.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
We take people's, under normal circumstances, we take people's rights to assemble and to express themselves, to process, all those things extremely seriously. We also have to balance those rights with other people's rights to go about their lawful business.
Thank you,
That's
Commissioner.
the balancing act that officers are always doing. During these regulations, which, by the way, as you know, have changed countless times in the last 6 months, the officers have had to be policing not just the normal kind of way in which you would think about a protest, but also the health regulations.
Sorry, Commissioner, we are out of time with this question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to question from Assembly Member Desai, which is about keeping Londoners safe during pandemic. Assembly Member Desai, do you want to also indicate who the question is